Hello! Here are some obscure terrain making tips that might help you one day. They might not, but they're probably good to know. Oxide pigments. When working with plaster of Paris or modeling compound, I use oxide pigments if that piece is going to get a lot of use. Oxide pigments color the plaster, so if it chips, it's less noticeable. You'll find pigments in the cement section of the hardware shop. They will make the plaster ever so slightly weaker, but much less so than using like paint or ink or something like that to try to tint it, which I see all the time. Also, follow the safety direction on the back of this stuff because it's basically rust in a bag and it will also stain everything you love. I store mine in a big box, so if it spills anywhere, it's all contained. Oil-based clay. Specifically, I use monster clay, but there's lots out there, and this is a miracle material for mold making. Not only for sculpting, but I also use it to make impromptu walls and containers for making molds, and I seal gaps, plug holes, and to avoid using hot glue, and you can even use it as a mold. The 50-50 green stuff and Milliput mix. If you were a 14-year-old kid like me that bought green stuff with the dreams of being a sculptor and then gave up when you quickly realized that holy shit, this stuff is really hard to use, well, I'm really sorry to hear that. But here's a hot tip. Mix 50% green stuff and 50% Milliput and you'll find it so much easier to use. You'll get the smooth finish of the green stuff with the clay-like properties of the Milliput. It's less sticky and easier to work with, and it's bloody great. Bonus tip, when it comes to storing epoxies, they come typically packaged in some sort of plastic that's easy to remove at first, but after a few months of storage and handling, that packaging will stick onto itself for dear life. So when I buy epoxy, I immediately unravel it from whatever container it's in and I rewrap it in baking paper because it doesn't stick to that. DIY sculpting tools. I love making my own tools for sculpting, but the number one best tool I use is this bad boy. It's just a bit of green stuff on the end of a paintbrush. Use a bit of water to make it nice and smooth before it sets, and then you'll have a hard but flexible sculpting tool. I use it way more than the soft silicone ones, and the nice smooth finish is really good for like rolling around on a piece and stuff. But I also have all these really weird ones and I use them all the time just for getting textures really quickly. Hand sanitizer. Okay, I'm sure we all have a bunch of this now, but I actually found it's really good for cleaning your hands when you forget to wear gloves after messy activities like airbrushing or using weathering pigments or mixing modeling epoxies, and it gets the crud right off and it doesn't dry out your hands because of the glycerin. Really good. Okay, texture sampling. The Craftsman showed off texture sampling in one of his videos and it changed my life. Now, I'm looking for textures everywhere. I use thermoplastic to make molds and then I fill those with plaster, and I have so many cool things to make things out of. Like this old hard drive, which has perfect textures for a cool sci-fi wall or rooftop or, you know, all sorts. What I hold onto and what I throw away. After being in the hobby for just a bit, you'll quickly develop a compulsion to store a bunch of junk you'll probably never use. But you might one day. The method I use to decide what to keep is this. Before I put something in my junk box, I hold it up and I go, what could I make with you? And if it sparks something instantly, I keep it. Not only do I know that this thing has potential, but I've also sort of now indexed it into my brain for when I need to problem solve. I know this might be a solution. When it comes to keeping raw materials like cardboard or foam or plastics, I'm always trying to at least match 2 of the 3 following criteria. Is it easy to use? Is it hard to find? Is it easy to store? If I'm not getting at least 2 of those things, it gets thrown away. My bootleg hot wire cutter. This is my bootleg hot wire cutter, and I'm actually showing you because I'm hoping someone else out there can reverse engineer it and make a tutorial on how to replicate it, because I think mine just worked by coincidence. The power source is a portable USB power bank, The cable is an old charging cable. The handle is just some cut MDF. The nichrome wire came out of an old fan heater, and it's all just stuff I've already owned. And somehow, with so many variables like length and wire gauge and power output, it all seems to work really well. I don't know. I'm really asking for help here. So please, if you know what you're doing, comment or message me or something. Reusing silicon. Silicon is really, really expensive, especially at the moment. So I fill all my new molds with chunks of old, unusable molds. And it works really well for bulking out space, and it's not wasteful. Okay, weights. These little weights are something I never knew I needed until I had them. I made little DIY ones, and then eventually these 3D printed ones, which I call battery coffins because I designed them specifically for all my old heavy batteries because I feel bad just throwing them away. They're great for applying just the right amount of pressure on delicate things while they dry. Like these flowers, which always seem to come unstuck, or shingles, or unruly balsa wood strips because I store everything really poorly, or even just holding down templates while I'm working outside. Organization. So I have a new organization strategy to help organize all my useful bits, but keep the same loose and fun and inspiring and whimsical charm that everyone loves about my bits box. Here we go. The bits box. You've seen it before. It's self-explanatory. This is like a semi-curated box of model bits designed specifically for maximum creativity. I take this to friends' houses or my local club when I need something to do. Then I have this box. This is things on sprues, and this is stuff that hasn't been clipped and put into a bits box yet. This big box is called Big Non-Things. What is a non-thing, you may be asking? Well, it's something that doesn't exist in the 32mm world. This is all stuff waiting to be made into something else that actually could exist. Then we have small non-things, and I separate them just so they're easy to dig through because I end up having a lot of stuff. Then we have sci-fi things. These are things in a 32mm world. Greeblies and machines and stuff that are just distinctly sci-fi. Then we have non-sci-fi things, which covers basically everything else. Okay, so I know this system sounds really silly, but I think it actually works really well. Yeah, it keeps things loose and easy to maintain without like putting limits on yourself and all that. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's a good system. Better flock. I showed you how to make flock in a really good 4-minute video ages ago, but let me tell you, I've found the secret ingredient I've been missing. Instead of mixing in a little bit of water, add a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and this will allow the paint to penetrate into the wood, and it gives a much more consistent color. You can see in this example, this speckly one is one that I did without isopropyl alcohol, and this one is with isopropyl alcohol, and this one is isopropyl alcohol with a little bit of green ink, which produced a really nice, vibrant color. Really cool, right? Yeah, game changer. And it's really, really fast because the isopropyl alcohol dries much faster than the water. As if that tutorial couldn't get faster. Don't put it in the oven though, it's not good. You can mix 3D printed resin. I didn't know this. A friend very kindly gave me this bottle of translucent green 3D print resin. The problem is it's impossible to see any details before priming it. But turns out you can mix resins of the same type to get different colors. So by adding a little bit of leftover blue, I got this nice readable sort of sea glassy color. Really good. I also used it on all my cultists so I could keep track of each iteration by making them slightly darker than the one before. Stripping miniatures. For stripping miniatures, I use isopropyl alcohol. It doesn't perform as well as something like Simple Green because it doesn't have a degreaser in it, but for 95% of the models that I use, it does a great job. And it's fast, and it's accessible, and it's multi-purpose. So just buy isopropyl alcohol because it's really, really useful for so many applications. Bonus tip, when I buy plastic models on eBay to strip, I make sure to look for models with a nice matte paint job. And the worse the paint job, the better, because it's probably cheap paint that will come off easily. Basic green stuff sculpting. If you want to get comfortable with using green stuff or milliput, I always tell people to make a cobblestone base first. Cover your base in your material and try to make one stone at a time. The two things you gotta know is water is your best friend. This stops the putty from sticking to your tool and fingers. And two, your natural instinct will be to push into your material and drag your tool along to draw the shape you want to make. Don't do that. Instead, just use little downwards tippy taps and slowly move in the direction you want to go. Work at it bits at a time. Okay, why don't you give that a go right now? I'll wait. Okay, great. That looks really good. Now the next part is, I'm assuming you've done that. Next part is look at your base and look at it from a profile. If the base has like a dome to it, if the cobblestones have a dome to it, that's your next challenge. Make your cobblestones flat and the same, and that will teach you how to control the putty on every axis and understand how it moves and shifts and sort of rearranges itself. It's a good exercise. And then after that, draw a skull on a piece of paper and then try to make that skull. Yeah, that's another fun one. Here's a required reading list. This list are all my favorite things to read and listen to and look at that have inspired all my projects in the last couple of years. And don't listen to my friend John who says about audiobooks not being reading. Get out of here, John. Audiobooks are for cool people and you should listen to them. I'll see you next time. Bye. Me again. I'm making bases at the moment, and I'm using core flute to do that. Core flute is like a corrugated cardboard, but the plastic version, and it's really, really good for making bases with because over time it's not going to warp from the moisture in the air, and it's really, really cheap. As long as you can fill the holes with modeling compound, you're good to go. Hello, it's me. I just remembered another little tip. This is called a magic stick, and the idea is if you're having trouble getting your magnets in the right polarity while you're magnetizing your miniatures or your terrain, you use a magic stick. The idea is that one side says giver and one side says receiver, and these on both sides have magnets going in the same polarity. And then when you go to magnetize something, say like putting a magnet on a body, you would use the receiver side. And then when you're magnetizing the arm, which is going to the body, you would use the giver side. And that way, all your magnets are always going to be in the right orientation. Every single time. Every time. As long as you follow the rule. And then I've marked this one blue, so it always stands out because that's the one you're using like 90% of the time. Yeah,